Hello friends, welcome back to another week of dinners video, or if you are new here, welcome. If you saw my previous video, you'll know that we've had the flu going around our house for the last 2 weeks, week and a half, something like that, and I was one that also had the flu this week, so I did not make as many dinners as I usually do. If you are new here, hello, welcome. My name is Amber, and we are a family of 6 living in the Ozark Mountain region. I usually make almost all of our meals at home, and I try to do the best I can making them from scratch. We are a homeschooling family, so we eat breakfast, lunches, dinners, snacks, everything from home. There is maybe one meal a week that we eat out, and usually that's the day that we're going to get groceries. So I usually make a significant amount of meals at home and I like to share them every week with you. However, this week we were sick, like I said, so we didn't have as many meals. However, I am still a mom and still needing to feed everybody in the family. So this week it is a little different because we really made a lot of our meals stretch. We had a lot of soup that I had made previously. I might have shared it in my last week's video, possibly the week before, but I know that I shared them pretty recently on here, and that's kind of what we've been living off of was homemade chicken noodle soup. And then, like I said, I made a couple of bigger meals and we kind of just had them stretch. It was very much a survival week here. But I am really happy to report that we are all on the mend. We just kind of have a really bad cough at this point. Other than that, it feels like things are starting to return back to normal. With all that being said, if you were wondering what I am making here, I am making some homemade banana bread. I had bought a bunch of bananas because my kids were eating them constantly. It was like with every meal, every snack, they were just wanting bananas. And so I had bought a bunch of them, and then all of a sudden they stopped eating them. They stopped asking for bananas, stopped wanting bananas. I'm literally trying to give these bananas away and they were just not biting. If you have kids, I'm sure you can relate. So I decided to make a banana bread. Now, please let me know because there seems to be a divide in my household. So I am so curious and I love asking these questions because you guys totally deliver with the answers. I absolutely love it. But there is a divide in my family. I love banana bread with walnuts in them. Um, I have a recipe that I think is just the best banana bread recipe. It is different from the one I'm making currently, but my husband, he is set on nuts do not belong in banana bread. And I'm the opposite. I love, love, love walnuts in banana bread. So I would love to know your guys' stance on this. What side of the line are you on? Do nuts belong in banana bread? This is a new recipe to me, but I am doing it without the walnuts because, like I said, my husband likes them without. So I was trying to make these basically for him and the kids. I figured they would probably like them more without the nuts as well. But my favorite one is with the nuts for sure. I also did double this recipe. So if you're looking at it and wondering why I have so much, it's because I doubled the recipe. I had so many bananas and I just figured we're a large family. We could use more than one loaf. So this is how it turned out. It was delicious with or without the walnuts, but it was really, really great to have on hand while we were sick and be able to have just a quick snack or breakfast to warm up, spread some butter on. It was delicious. And like usual, you can find all of today's recipes in the description box below. If for whatever reason you can't find them, there are some times where they upload a little slower. So if you can't find them, just let me know and I will make sure that I get them for you. I'm moving on to what I call elote corn and chicken bowls. If you know me, you know I love doing bowls. It is so easy for me just to get a bunch of ingredients and put them in a bowl and call it good for a meal. So that's kind of what I did this week. It's been a norm for me. I have a ton of chicken because it was recently on sale. So I have these. They are seasoned with like taco type seasoning, cumin, chili powder, garlic, salt, pepper, onion powder, and I threw them on the grill to cook completely through. And then I'll take them off the bone and add them to the bowls once everything's all done. I'm getting a big pot of rice going, and it is just the normal rice that I usually make. I added a tomato bouillon cube, which I don't usually have, but I actually bought on accident. It ended up working out. Oh, and if you see this Cajun style seasoning, my husband randomly picked it up a couple weeks ago, and it is really good. It was really, really great in the rice. So highly suggest if you find that, adding that to things like rice. It's also very good on like chicken and pork. But I added that to the rice, and like I said, I'm going to add a tomato bouillon cube and water, and it's very simple, but it was still very, very good. Now I'm going to go ahead and get started on the elote. I don't usually make it like this with canned corn or frozen corn. I actually really like it when it is corn on the cob and it's more legitimate, but and I remember we had that a lot in Chicago. They had really good sweet corn and it was just the best. This is a really great option if you don't have all that available. If you do have corn on the cob, I highly suggest just using that corn instead because I feel like you just can't beat that. But this is a really great alternative if you don't have that. I have the corn cooking on the stove just to get a little bit of like browning on it. I'm not cooking it just entirely. I'm just getting a little bit of browning on some of the kernels. And while I'm doing that, I'm slicing up tomatoes to go in our bowls too. I feel like it's just a nice option. A lot of times I'll add like salsa or pico de gallo, but I don't have any of that on hand, and I'm just going to use some tomatoes. Now that the corn is done cooking on the stove, I added it to a bowl and I'm going to add in all the ingredients, mix it together. When I was taping this, I thought that you could see more of the bowl and the ingredients that I was putting into it, but now that I'm seeing, you actually can't. So if you are wanting to make this for yourself, again, the ingredients will be down below in the description box, so you should be able to find all of them there. A lot of the ingredients usually are about the same or pretty similar. Sometimes there's a lot more. Sometimes if you want it just pretty minimal, that is fine too. But most of the time it is mayo with the corn, some sour cream. There's chili powder. I think some people use paprika, garlic powder. You use lime juice, cilantro. Sometimes my kids like a little bit of hot sauce drizzled on it. I think some people might use tahine. We didn't have any. And then you'll see I'm using feta cheese, and I don't know what they call it, but there's a Spanish cheese, and I do not like it, so I never end up buying it because I do not like it. But I use feta instead. It's a crumbly cheese, and I feel like it's similar, except I can actually tolerate feta. So that is why I'm using that. However, you can use the other one, and I'll put that in the description box below, and I'll just note that I use feta instead. here's how the elote turned out, and I just put that on top of the bowls with the chicken and the rice, the tomatoes. I did a little bit more feta and a little bit more cilantro, and I served it with some slices of avocado. It was a very simple meal, but it was really, really great, and even though it is so simple, it had so much flavor. The next meal that I'm making is my new obsession. If you were here for my pot roast trend, get ready because this one is amazing. This is copycat version of Popeye's Blackened chicken, and I want to immediately point out that I don't feel like it is really the same. Um, However, it is such an amazing chicken that I can't stop obsessing about it. So I don't usually make this for meals, like for dinners. I make this mostly for my husband and I's lunches, and I'll make a huge portion of it and then we'll have it throughout the week. There are a couple of times that we do have this for like dinners with the whole family, but generally, I just make this for like lunches for myself. And a lot of the time, I will actually just eat the chicken by itself, sometimes with a salad, and then sometimes as a wrap. And that's what you'll see in this video. I'll make it for just a very, very simple wrap, how I usually do it. But anyway, this chicken is very, very good. And so I couldn't resist. I had to share my new current obsession. And it will seem like I am putting on a ton of seasoning. However, the recipe calls for 1 pound of chicken, and I did 3 pounds. I like to buy the boneless, skinless chicken breast or thighs, and then I'll cut them up in not really bite-sized pieces. I try to do like more tender size pieces, and I put them on the grill opposed to the pan like the recipe says. Um, which might be why they're not exactly like the recipe and like the Popeyes version. However, this version it's incredible. So I highly suggest trying it. I did not add as much seasoning, even though I added in more of the chicken. I felt like after making it a couple of times, I didn't need as much seasoning as it originally called for just the 1 pound, if that makes any sense at all. Anyway, so I am putting on all the seasonings, and then there is just a drizzle of olive oil. And I want to make sure that all of these pieces of chicken are really pretty coated. And then I'll stir them up. I actually use my hands because I feel like that's the best way of getting it all on there and coated really well. And then we'll throw them on the grill. This is how the chicken turned out. I'm telling you, this is one of my new favorite things. I can just eat the chicken by itself. I don't need anything else with it. So, and I think that this would actually make a really good seasoning, like a rub for chicken wings or like the little drumettes or whatever they're called. But just thrown on the grill like that. I'm always looking for a really good wings seasoning. My kids love chicken wings, and I think this might actually be it. This might be the winner. I'm moving on to the next dinner for this week's video, and I don't know what to call it. When I wrote it down, I ended up writing down the recipe name, and they just called it an Amish feast. And I didn't think really anything of it. And then when I put it on the menu that we have on our fridge for the week, and I told my 7-year-old, he always asks what we're having for dinner. And when he asked, I'm like, well, it's called Amish feast. And so then when dinner actually came around, he was actually really disappointed because he thought that we were having like this big grand feast, and that is not at all. It's like a casserole. It is very, very good. It was not a disappointment. However, it was a disappointment to my 7-year-old who was expecting a grand feast. So if you happen to be noticing a theme in the last couple of my videos with the Amish recipes, I came across an Amish book and I've been using a bunch of their recipes. I like their recipes because a lot of the time they're very simple. They don't have as many ingredients, and when you are trying to save on a grocery budget, it is really great recipes to use. So I like using these, and I thought since I like to share more frugal type of recipes, I thought that this would be a good one to try out. Now, this is the first time that I'm making this particular recipe. However, after I made it, I swear that I make something very similar to it. It is a very basic but very delicious meal. I have the ground beef on the stove browning with the onion that I diced up. And now I am cutting up 4 cups of potatoes. You can use the cans of diced potatoes if you want to make this even quicker, but I had a bunch of potatoes and I don't have any of the canned potatoes on hand. So I am just using these, and it's, like I said, about 4 cups of diced potatoes. Once all the potatoes were diced up, I put them into a greased casserole dish. And then when the meat mixture is cooked through, then you'll just dump all that on top of the potatoes and mix it in. And then you can add in all the rest of the ingredients before you pop it into the oven. I added the amount of cheddar cheese that the recipe calls for into the original mixture. However, about 10 minutes before it was done, maybe a little bit more, maybe it was like 15 minutes before it finished cooking, I added in a sprinkle of cheese on top of it to really bake, and you can also broil it too if you want to brown it a little more. And here's how it turned out. It was bubbly and cheesy and delicious. You can serve this with like some green beans or broccoli. We, like I said, have been really sick, so I did not want to go all out. And I have a veggie tray that I usually keep on hand. So I actually just put the veggie tray out with a plate of this for everybody, and I also put out like some fruit, grapes, oranges, stuff like that. It was a very, very easy dinner. I'm moving on to something that my family has kind of become known for in our area. We have been making this pork butt for, I want to say, close to 10 years now. We started years ago when we lived in Chicago. We didn't have a smoker or a fancy grill or anything when we lived up there. So I always did this in the oven, and that's actually what I'm going to be doing today. However, now that we've moved and we have a lot better of a grill with actually a smoker on it, that's usually how we make the pork. We make this pork for several different occasions every year. One of them, we host 4th of July every year. And this is something that we make every year for 4th of July. And now we actually have people that will bring us pork butts and we will smoke them for them. So this is a really great recipe. And I feel like it's also fail proof. I have made it so many different ways, and this is probably the best way. Now, what I'm doing now, it's kind of a 2-day recipe. So the first day, what you'll do is I am putting together all of the spices into this jar with some brown sugar, and that will be the rub for it. And I'm putting it all together first because we'll also use it when we make the brine that you put the pork in overnight. Now, again, it does seem like it is a lot of seasoning. However, it makes a really, really great crust when you put the seasoning on very heavily. And then as you shred it apart, it's not that the seasoning's everywhere, it's just on that crusted portion, and it mixes in very well. And it does not end up being overpowering or overwhelming, I promise you. This recipe is also another great recipe to have when you're wanting to make meals stretch. I like making this and then having it several different ways. Usually, the first night we will have the pork like on pork sandwiches with some coleslaw and barbecue sauce. I like serving them in barbecue bowls. You know me, I love my bowls, so I will do them with like some sweet potatoes and coleslaw on the side. You can do pickles and like a drizzle of barbecue sauce. I call those barbecue bowls, and I'm making something similar to that today for these. But you can have them on top of mac and cheese, have like a barbecue pork mac and cheese. That's very, very popular. You can just have this so many different ways. I'm also going to be using this for next week's video where I'm going to be making a pulled pork chili. I have never had anything like that, and it's kind of like the breakfast chili that I made last week, where it was something I've never heard of. So, and I know my husband's going to be really excited about it. So stay tuned if you're wanting to see that. Okay, so now that I have the rub completely done, I'm going to use a little bit of it in this bowl for the brine, and then I'm going to put the jar aside for tomorrow when I actually put it on the pork. So what I'm making now is the brine, and it's basically just a lot of salt, water, brown sugar, and then some of the rub. I have done this where you don't do it overnight. And I have also actually skipped this step. However, now that I have skipped it and stuff and kind of messed around with this recipe, I do feel like it is really necessary to have the pork sit in the brine. Um, I would suggest at least 12 hours, but the more you do it, like 24 hours, I feel like the better. Now we are on the next day. I took it out of the brine and I put it into this pan that I'm going to actually cook it in the oven. I'm not messing with the grill today, so I'm just going to do it in the oven. And like I said, I haven't done it that way in a while. However, I always used to do it like that, and it turned out just as good. So you are going to really heavily coat it and get it in all the nooks and crannies. I did not use this entire jar that I made, but almost all of it. And like I said, you want to get it into all the nooks and crannies, and it's going to seem excessive and like too much. However, I promise you it's not. It makes a really, really great crust. While that is going in the oven, I have it going at a really low temperature. It was like 300, maybe 320 for several hours. When we cook it on the smoker, it's more at like 250, I want to say, for about 10 hours. You can obviously, mess with the temperatures and stuff too. We have before. Sometimes it doesn't take that long and sometimes it does. It kind of really also depends on the grill. So I'm using the oven. It did not take nearly that long. I think it only took like 3 or 4 hours. It is also a smaller pork than I usually do. But I wanted to do somewhat of like a sweet potato hash. So I'm putting a bunch of diced sweet potatoes into a pan. I'll put a little bit of olive oil, salt, pepper, and garlic, and that was it. I sometimes will put like onions, but I'm not doing anything fancy today. I'm keeping it very low key, and that's really all I did. And I end up having it to where I'll cook it. I don't want them to be mushy, but I like having that little char on them. I love sweet potatoes when they're more savory and not sweet, but that's how I was doing it. I love serving these sweet potatoes with the pork and the coleslaw. So good. Here's how the pork turned out. It is so tender. It is just shredding so easily. I like to shred it all up and mix it together so to kind of distribute the seasoning and just all the flavors. It is so, so delicious. Here's how the meal turned out. But that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching another What's for Dinner video. I hope you have a great rest of your day. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.